Welcome to another All Israel News Update. I'm Hanan Lishinsky, and today we again will deal with the escalation on Israel's northern border. Hezbollah has continued and kept on attacking Israel and escalated its attacks in recent weeks, and we have now seen the worst incident of its kind since last October. So today we'll follow the question if disaster, as the Bible says, indeed will come from the north. So since last October, when Hamas opened this current ongoing war against Israel by invading and massacring 1,200 people, what many don't know and what many international media outlets haven't covered to the extent that we have striven to do is that Hezbollah has been attacking Israel non-stop, almost every day, with a few days of respite, since last October. Over 9, almost 10 months now of fighting, of everyday rockets. Israel has evacuated 60,000 or possibly a bit more residents of towns close to the northern border, to the border with Lebanon, and many of those 50,000 maybe or even more are still evacuated, still can't return to their homes. And Israel's education minister just last week said that the families and their children will have to start the new school year in wherever they are. They're scattered across Israel, but they will not start the new school year in their homes. They will lose another year where they will live either in a hotel that is financed by the government or with their family or in some other place somewhere around Israel. So there's a strip of land 5-6 kilometers deep in northern Israel that is completely evacuated and by now devastated, partly destroyed. Thousands of buildings, many of them homes, have been destroyed in the north. And that is the background that led to Hezbollah attacking last Saturday. They shot an Iranian-made rocket produced and transferred to Hezbollah from Iran, their main backer. They shot this rocket into a Druze town on the northern Golan Heights, and this rocket hit a soccer field while there were children playing there. 12 children were killed, a bit more than 30 people, most of them children, were wounded. We just received the report that in Safat's Ziv hospital, there are still 3 or 4 children there who are still hospitalized. One of them is still in serious condition, but thank God most of them are now in bad but in stable condition, and there doesn't appear to be a danger to their lives. So this incident was the worst incident so far, the worst overall actually, since Hamas invaded Israel. So 12 killed, over 30 wounded, and that is where we are today. Now, as I mentioned, this horrific attack targeted a Druze town, Majdal Shams. It's in the northern Golan Heights, as I mentioned, and it is almost exclusively populated by the Druze. Now, the Druze are a very interesting case. They are a religious minority inside Israel. They are Arabic-speaking, but they are not Muslims. So they actually have a very interesting history. They split off from a minor branch of the Shia branch of Islam. Again, try to follow this, but they are a splinter group from within Islam. They splintered off almost 1,000 years ago and then became their own ethno-religious group in the Middle East. Now, ethno-religious group, by the way, an ethno-religion is something that is very often found here in the Middle East. It means that the ethnic and the religious aspects of a group are basically inseparable. So another example for this is Judaism, actually. So even back a few hundred years ago, nobody would have said, I'm a Jew, but I don't believe in Judaism. To be part of the people group, of the nationality, if you want, of the ethnic group, is to be part of the religious group as well, and vice versa. So this means that you can't, in the case of the Druze, this means that you can't become Druze. You can't start believing in the Druze religion. You have to be born into this group. Now, the Druze religion is also a very interesting case. Actually, there isn't much known about it. There's great secrecy surrounding what exactly they believe. But what we know from academics and people who have investigated their religion It's of course has influences from Islam because it's splintered off from there. It has influences from Christianity actually, from Gnostic streams of Christianity which aren't really part of Christianity today, but also from Buddhism, from Neoplatonism, Greek philosophy, and so on. So this in itself, very interesting, a very unique group in the Middle East. Now the Druze live mainly divided among Lebanon, Syria, Israel, and some also live in Jordan. And this partition of the Druze people has created a very interesting situation now, because the Druze have been persecuted throughout the centuries because they are a splinter group that left Islam. And despite that they themselves call themselves al-muwahidun, which means the monotheistic ones, for Islam they don't fit the criteria of monotheism and therefore were heavily persecuted at times. So this has led to the interesting phenomenon that Druze today, in every country that they live in, are at first they're loyal to the government that they live under. So the Druze in Syria, for example, were supporters of the Assad regime in Syria. This is starting to change, maybe we'll get to this later, but in Israel this means that most of the Druze in Israel are very strong supporters of the state. They are very patriotic, and they enlist in the IDF at even higher rates than the Jewish population. So 80% of the Druze actually serve in the IDF. Many of them have reached very high ranks, and many of them also go on to serve in the police, for example, and in other state institutions. So they are very patriotic. Now, as I said, the Druze in Syria, they have been supportive of their local regime, which is the Assad regime. So Bashar al-Assad, who is in power now, and his father before that, who ruled Syria before. So we have inside Israel a very strange phenomenon that the Druze who live in the Golan Heights, so the Golan Heights were conquered from Syria actually, and since then, even though Israel has annexed the Golan Heights in the 80s, so those Druze in the Golan Heights, unlike their brothers who live within Israel, which in parts that always were Israel, the Druze in the Golan Heights actually kept their allegiance to the Assad regime, partly out of fear of retribution for their families who still remain in Syria, partly. But most of the Druze in the Golan Heights have actually not taken up Israeli citizenship, despite being offered it many times. So the latest statistics that I have seen speak of only around 20% of the Druze in the Golan Heights, and there are several tens of thousands, only 20% of them have Israeli citizenship. Which means, by the way, that of those 12 children, we don't know, but it is probable that most of them are not even Israeli citizens, but they might be Syrian citizens and have Syrian passports. So a very complex, very difficult situation to wrap your mind around. But this is the situation, and as we always say in the Middle East, it's a bit more complicated than most situations elsewhere maybe. So despite this a bit strange situation, the strike obviously was targeted against Israel, and most Israelis have come out very strongly in their support for the Druze, who, as I said, most of the Druze in Israel are very patriotic, so most Jews in Israel see the Druze as their brothers. So, for example, my personal social media accounts have been flooded from friends and people I know from the army and other places, flooded with Druze flags and with posts in support of the Druze and saying, telling the Druze that we love them, we support them, they're part of us. Even though some of those children, as I mentioned, might not have had Israeli citizenship, this was an attack on us, and this is how most Israelis have taken this. And this isn't a sentiment that was just among the populace, but even if you know Jerusalem, at the entrance to the city of Jerusalem, there's a big bridge, David's Harp Bridge. It was lit up with the Druze flag. and the Tel Aviv City Hall, for example, was also lit up with a Druze flag. So there's been an outpouring of support and love for the Druze community in Israel, which suffered this horrendous loss. So this being the situation as it is, where do we go from here? Now, many media outlets, and us included, we have used terms like we're on the brink of an all-out war, we're one step away from an escalation, and so on and so forth. Now this, as I said, was the attack in Majdal Shams was the most heavy, the most serious incident on the northern border and in all of Israel actually since last October. So due to the seriousness of this incident, Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was still in the US after his state visit, actually took a very unusual step of boarding a plane on Shabbat, which Israeli prime ministers do not do usually, to come back to Israel. And when he landed, he immediately entered a security meeting with the security heads. And yesterday evening, the Israeli government cabinet basically approved the response strikes against Lebanon. We don't have details of this yet, but apparently the cabinet authorized Netanyahu, as well as Defense Minister Gallant, to determine the timing and the method of the strikes. But the general outline of the strike apparently has been approved. So Israel will respond. We don't know how yet, and we don't know where Israel will respond, which is almost one of the most important aspects of this whole thing, because the location and especially the distance from the border of Israeli as well as Hezbollah strikes until now has been part of a kind of, it's strange to say a game, but Israel and Hezbollah have had this equation where, for example, if Hezbollah hits a target 10 kilometers from the border, Israel would usually hit a target 10 kilometers inside Lebanon. So these are the considerations that are being taken, and we are now awaiting the Israeli response, which we will know will come, but we don't know where and when. An important factor in this is, of course, the international pressure. So we have many reports indicating that behind the scenes, the US, France, and many other countries have turned to Israel directly and are applying all kinds of diplomatic pressure to get Israel to restrain its response as much as possible in a manner that is very reminiscent of when Iran attacked Israel back in April with a massive attack, and Israel responded only with a very small pinpoint strike that was more symbolic than anything else. And of course there are major efforts going on to prevent a war, an all-out open war, unlike the fighting that has been going on for several months between Israel and Hezbollah, because the US and Israel as well, obviously, is concerned that this war might escalate into a war that would draw in Iran and all the other, all its other militia forces around the region and basically inside the whole region into a large war. Now, as you may or may not know, the modern Hebrew language, which was revived and is based on the biblical Hebrew, today is saturated with allusions, with idioms, and quotes from the Bible, from biblical verses. And this basically takes the task that, for example, in English you have many allusions and quotes from Shakespeare in your daily language. So here in Israel, many of the quotes used in daily language to illustrate modern problems are taken from the Bible. And in this case, regarding the danger of the war against Hezbollah in the north, there's been a Bible verse that has been quoted many times in recent months. So it is taken from Jeremiah 1:14, and in Hebrew it goes, Mitzafon tipatach hara'a al kol yoshvei haaretz, which is translated in English to, from the north, disaster will come upon all of the residents of this country. So this is obviously a very poignant reminder of where we are right now, and we will continue to hope and pray and do everything we can here in Israel, of course, to prevent this war. But again, we appear to be on the brink once more. We appear to be closer than ever. And this is where we will leave you today. To get more updates and more backgrounds also on this whole situation that Israel is in right now, about the Druze, about the northern border, and everything else, go to allisrael.com and follow us on our social media channels.